Hello and good morning. If anybody is watching this, I'm waiting for somebody yet to join. And I have a feedback from at least one student who is on the way to join me. So it will take a couple more minutes before I will start. If you're watching this on the YouTube while the session is still live, you're very welcome to join to the Hangout, and you should get the link to your Radar email address. So please do it if you want to interact and ask questions. Okay, let's get started. And I just want to mention that this session will be recorded by two different means. One by means of YouTube recording and another one locally on my computer. So I will share both recordings in detail in case that you miss the broadcast. Again, I apologize for not being able to lecture today in class, but I hope this session will be a good substitute. So today we will continue working with jQuery material, and last time we just started working with this. And I told you that jQuery is pretty much a library written in JavaScript that is intended to easify the experience that novice JavaScript developers have while observing the look of different methods and properties that you can find in DOM, in Document Object Model. So jQuery has a number of useful methods and syntax sugars that easify the way how the DOM can be accessed and manipulated. So we start from pretty much including reference to jQuery into our project, into our script tag of the main HTML file. And last time I told you that we can just go to the CDN or content distribution network that is hosted by jQuery and copy a link to the latest version, which is jQuery version 3, and use it directly into your website. You probably can find references to jQuery library by other content distribution networks. So definitely there is one hosted by Google, and I just can't recall what other providers host jQuery currently. But as long as you deal with the jQuery of particular version, and as long as you can be assured about the integrity of the file that you download. So in other words, if you use this entire script tag without modification into your HTML, in your HTML file, HTML document, then you'll be fine. We currently not that much concerned about integrity because this is not a security class, and I just want you to become familiar with the basic syntax of jQuery. So all we want to do is to just copy that tag and switch to the development environment and paste it into appropriate place there. So I'm switching to the Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to start the new project. Okay, I will host it somewhere in my downloads. And I will call this FA5 or FA5. I believe we didn't have a chance to work with assignment 5 yet. Right now, the template can be created with the help of Emmet extension. And that is my demo. And if you recall, I mentioned this a couple times that all script tags have to be included at the very end of the body of HTML document. So we just, oops, not that one. Seems that I wasn't able to copy the thing from the website. Okay. Something doesn't work well. Let me try it again. Usually when you see that kind of performance issues on your computer, there is more than likely that there is some improperly written JavaScript behind the scene trying to do something against your will. So particularly, let me just make a few comments here. Particularly what we observe on this web page is not a fully flavored browser window, but it is something called pop-up or modal window as a part of the HTML markup. So this is not a browser tab. This is just an area in the previously existing HTML page that appears as a dialog. And with the help of JavaScript, you can actually create this kind of functionality. And the reason that it doesn't work well in my particular case, it means that something is going on in the background with either the Opera browser not to be working well, or maybe the source code of this page is trying to do something on the background that operating system is not allowing it to do. And the most common reason for this is to enable some kind of tracking functionality. For example, they want to, usually the CDN providers want to identify who is downloading their resources, who's accessing particular pages, and very oftenly operating systems, sophisticated operating systems, try to block this kind of activity. And another reason could be that I'm using the Opera browser that has a built-in AD blocker that is available through control interface available here. And the fight between the source code that is willing to show some advertisement and the browser suppressing this kind of advertisement could also result in the JavaScript functionality failure. So I hope now, after I copied it, I will be able to paste it. Okay, now it worked. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't really need the full support of the script tag, the full content of the script tag. I just need the source attribute, and that is the minimal version of the tag that I need. Now I want to add my custom script tag where I will write my program into. And we'll call it my script. And that file, my script, is about to sit in exact same directory, excuse me, where the main HTML file is sitting, and this is the file yet to be developed. So I'm creating this in the next browser tab. And the way how jQuery works, okay, I don't need this at the moment. The way how jQuery works is pretty much you, in the main JavaScript file, you have to define the body of the function called ready that will be loaded as soon as the document becomes loaded into the browser memory. And I showed you on the previous class one template for doing this. And here is that template. Now, the general idea is the $sign at the beginning of the command is a reference to the jQuery. So pretty much a $sign is the function name that we call. So we pass the object document to the jQuery. And once we pass document to the jQuery, it wraps the document with some additional functionality. And that functionality, for example, is a function called ready that we can call. And that function registers an event handler. If you recall us doing the click event handler, so that's pretty much the same deal. We register this function to be executed as soon as the document becomes ready. That's why we have to write the body of that function here to make sure that our JavaScript functionality will be activated only when the document is ready. And the document will become ready as soon as its head and body portions will be loaded into the browser. Typically, you have CSS styles referenced in the head portion of the document, some HTML markup, and script text loaded in the body portion of the document. And head and body portions of the document can be loaded concurrently. That's the advantage of having script file, script text to be referenced in the body of the document. This allows CSS code and script code to be loaded at the same time. It's usually not a problem when you host CSS code locally on the same site where the rest of the source codes are hosted. Because in this case, if you load HTML code and CSS and script code from the same resource, it's pretty much not a big deal. But in situations like ours, when we try to load jQuery library from the external resource, then the web browser will have to make a request to this external resource. And same would have been done if we include some external CSS here in the head portion. So in other words, when our document gets loaded, a number of external resources will be made to load CSS code and JavaScript code. And only when those resources will be loaded and the HTML markup, if it is loaded, we don't have any HTML markup here. That's why loading of HTML is a trivial step in our consideration. But if we had HTML markup, then it also would require some time to load. Because HTML markup may have, for example, images. Images are normally either stored locally on the site or also referenced from a third-party resources. And those third-party resources also require a bit of time to access and load the image data. That's why loading of the document HTML markup also may take some time. And all the time, if you add it together, will result in the document loading. So our JavaScript, since it appears at the very end, will be activated only after all this markup is loaded. And in our case, the load of the jQuery library will be instant, and we will not going to be able even to observe this. But let me just try to run our code in the browser. Okay, that's not what I want. I believe I stored it in here. And I want A5 HTML. So we don't have anything yet to be constructed on this web page, but we definitely can observe the console, and it should have hello world or just hello written, just because that's what we print onto the console in our script. Now let us consider a practical task, and our practical task will be to use jQuery to dynamically create HTML code. You learned from the previous assignment that creating of the HTML using the vanilla JavaScript is a doable task. So jQuery simplifies this task significantly. And it simplifies it based on a simple workflow where you can chain a number of jQuery calls. So in other words, one call to jQuery library returns jQuery object that you can use to call another jQuery function. In this case, you will not need, actually sometimes you need, but the number of additionally created variables can be minimized, and the creation of HTML markup using jQuery is much easier task maybe if you not yet practice with vanilla JavaScript, but for the first time, you definitely will you will find that using of the jQuery in place of vanilla JavaScript, it's an easier workflow to create HTML markup. So let us see how it can be done. And in this case, I want to switch to the code. And right after hello, I will I will create a header to be added to my HTML page. And the header, in case of JavaScript, with jQuery functionality, can be created as simple as this. What you can see here is, first of all, a call to the jQuery function itself. And this time, instead of document, we pass a text string, h2, surrounded with the angle bracket to denote h2 tag, h2 HTML tag. So result of this invocation is a creation of a jQuery object that will represent h2 virtual node or header type 2 virtual node. And then we simply call a method of that node called text and specify what kind of text our h2 node should receive. And pretty much now, all we need to do is to add this node to our document. And we can do this either by specifying the document append, and this time we can just copy the definition and pass it to as the parameter of the append method. Because what we see returned from the text function, from the text method of the jQuery object, is jQuery object itself. We just modified it on fly, and then we append it to the document. Okay, so let us see how it works. There is a chance that we will probably need to replace document by document body, but I hope the jQuery will recognize the fact that we cannot add anything directly to the document and will instead append our h2 tag to the body of the document. But we have to check it first. So let me try to make some window arrangements. Okay, my window arrangements don't work today because of the high utilization. Okay, things don't work well today. And okay, that's more or less what I want it to look like. No, it doesn't work. Anyway, Let me pick up my browser window that got closed for some reason. Okay, and here is my browser window. Now let me refresh the page. And it appears that I cannot, so jQuery cannot create anything on the document directly. Let me show you how we can fix this problem. And there are actually a number of ways how we can fix it. First of all, I would like to apply the fix that we have already studied before. So instead of appending something to the document, I will append something to the body of the document. That's what we learned on the previous assignment, that you cannot append to the document, but you can append to the body of the document. And now I'm going to try this again. And it worked fine. So once again, what I've done, I created a jQuery wrapper, not around the document, but around the body portion of the document. And I called append method, which is a function of the jQuery. And I provided a new jQuery object as the argument of this function. If you want to read more about this kind of functions, you probably want to take a look at the documentation, particularly jQuery append. And that's what we see. And here is the syntax of that function. Pretty much you call append method, and usually when you see a function start from a period, it means that you have to apply it to the object, to the jQuery object that has previously been created. So in our case, when we call append method off of the jQuery object that was created on the basis of document body, we use period append. That's an indication. There is another kind of methods in jQuery that you will see, and you will see it very soon, their difference. But their names don't start from the period. Actually, period is not part of the method's name, but is an indication that a method has to be applied to the instance of jQuery. And by the way, in the left pane, you can see a summary of all kinds of methods, including CSS manipulation, including data manipulation, including animation and other kinds of effects, including events. So just spend your time in learning this variety of jQuery methods, and you'll be fine. And another method that we used was the text method, and we applied it also to the jQuery instance. So let me show you how this one looks in documentation. jQuery text. Again, as you can see, it starts with a period, meaning that you have to apply it to the jQuery instance. If instead of text you want to add a plain HTML, there is HTML method which will replace modification of inner HTML property of DOM node. So text only accepts and sanitizes the plain text. HTML method can accept the HTML text. Now, there is another method that I want you to take a look, and this method is called append_to. The difference between append and append_to is how we call them. So method append will be called off of the parent, and we specify a newly appended child as the parameter of the method. In contrast, method append_to will be called off of the child, and parameters would include the parent's reference to the parent or the target. And let us slightly modify our code to use append_to instead of append. So now instead of this location, we will use slightly different syntax. We will create a jQuery object of tag h2, and then we'll set up the text there, and then we'll call append_to method off of this. And as the parameter, we will call the target. We'll specify the target, and target will be document body. Right? Let us save it, and let us see how it works. The result should be exactly the same. And we can see that is the same result, because pretty much append method or append_to, they just work differently, but we also modified not just the name of the method, but the way how these methods are used. So that's what it is. And now let us take a look at what kind of targets can be specified with the append_to method. So the target is a selector, HTML string, an element, which is HTML element, array, or jQuery. So there is a variety of targets that we can specify. So let us try to, for example, use the element. In this case, instead of wrapping the document body into jQuery object, we'll just try to pass document body, which is the element itself. So instead of passing jQuery object, we'll pass the virtual node, which is document body by itself. And now let us try to run it again. Okay, that works exact same way. So pretty much we just save one extra action in wrapping around document body to create a jQuery object, which is nice. And by the way, from the standpoint of optimization of your jQuery scripts, jQuery scripts that are written with the help of jQuery, there are a number of techniques and number of best practices that you probably want to consume, and some of them are summarized on the web page that I advertised on the tutorial portion of our website. And let me just show you where you can read more about these techniques. So if you go to our website, and jumped into resources, I believe free books. So there is a book called jQuery Tricks by Tutorial Zine. And this book has 100 of advanced techniques that you want to utilize in your JavaScripts that are enhanced with jQuery, just to make your jQuery code more optimal. You're probably not yet ready to read through this text because we didn't cover that much of the jQuery, but this is definitely the reading that you want to have in mind if you will choose jQuery as the main front-end library for your future development. Now let us do something more interesting, and this time we will create HTML document based on some data object. Particularly, I want to create a table that represents some data. So no longer I want to have this as the part of my document and this as the part of my document. And I will create an object data with the following properties. So what I'm doing now, I'm creating a variable called data, and I set it up as an object. So the curly braces represent an object. In contrast to, excuse me, Java or C# or C programming languages, C++ programming languages, to create an object, you don't really need to formally call the constructor of some class, but you can create an object right away, right in place, and this is very convenient. So our object will represent some table data. And usually table data are organized in such a way that it contains table headers, the titles of those columns, and number of rows to be recognized as filling the table with the data. So in my case, I will have the data object to have two fields. Header, which will be an array of strings to be used in the header. And I will call this ID and name and what else? Action. So in this case, my data object now has one attribute called header, and that attribute stores the array of strings with that content. All right? I put a comma and then I create, let me just say rows. So rows of that table will be a collection or array of rows, which is an array. The square brackets represent arrays in JavaScript. Previously we had array of strings, and now I will have array of objects, which is perfectly fine in JavaScript. And array of object will have each entry in that array of objects will represent three entries, one for ID, one for name, and one for action, to be printed on every row of my array, of my table. And that's probably not that straightforward what kind of action will I place in the array, so I will keep that entry in the array as null. So let me just do this and then you will see how the whole thing works. So ID will be 1, and let me make it as a nested array. 1, name, John, action. Now, as you can see, array can be comprised from entries of different types. And to see that this is the valid syntax, you can actually copy that text and paste it into the console of your browser, just to see that it will work. Now, that is a pretty straightforward syntax, and it is accepted on the JavaScript level. And you probably want to forget what you know about arrays, that array is a collection of the data of the same kind. So in our case, the first entry is a number, the second is a string, and null is the data-less entry, and three of them can be combined into the same array. Right? So going back to our code, we can create another array. And let me just duplicate the line a couple more times. And I will modify the ID field and name field. Alice Bob. Okay. So this object data represents the headers and the data of the row. So now let us create a table using jQuery on the basis of this data object. So the general idea is to, first of all, create a skeleton of the table that would have, if you recall, the table has the t-body and t-head portions. And the main advantage of jQuery, of using jQuery in this context, is that every row will have a number of TD elements that have to be created separately. Without jQuery, you would probably have to create a number of TD elements and assign them into variables prior appending them to the particular row, because table has at least 3 levels of hierarchy: table itself, and then the row, and then the cell. So let us see how this can be done in jQuery. And to get started, I just want to say I will create a variable table that is just a new table object with no parameters. And at the end, I want to append this to the body of my HTML document. So let me say,
Professor,
yes,
you said you will load this on Georgia View, right?
yes, it will be in Georgia View.
Okay.
So we'll use append to document body. And as you can see, not only we create a table object with no rows, with no elements, but we at the same time append it to the document body. Now, if we execute this code, the HTML markup will just contain an empty table. Here it is, our empty table. But the benefit of this for us is that now we have the variable table that we can use to append rows and cells into this table. So, for example, we can now say table that append a new element of t-head, which is the header of the table, and it will create t-head. And now we want to add a row element with these 3 th tags. So pretty much HTML table contains the following structure. Let me temporarily show you this. So table following followed by the head, and then T body. If I'm not mistaken, this syntax will work. It does work. For some reason, and it doesn't get activated. Head, T body. Okay. T head, and then T body, and then inside T head we would have TR transmission. TR with a number of TH elements. For example, ID, and then TH with name, and then TH with action. And then in the T body, we'll also have activity head. And then here we'll have T body, and then again, the row, for example, 1, the John. So that is the result that we willing to achieve. Then another TR with TD. For example, 2. That is enough. And we can continue. So pretty much the responsibility of our jQuery script will be to recreate this kind of hierarchy. So we don't need this in our HTML markup because that's what we will create on fly. I just had it here for illustration. So let us go back to our script. Excuse me for a second. Right. So we appended T-head to the table, and now we want to append row to the T-head. So if we will continue writing here, for example, append and do like this, TR. This TR would be appended not to the T-head, but would be appended to the table. We don't want this. That's why we have to have in mind the hierarchy. And I suggest you to use some indentation in this case. So append method will have the new element T-head, and we will use append method applied to the T-head element. In this case, there will be TR. And again, the same story. We use TR as the parent to the number of th elements. Okay. Now, our th elements will contain these entries: ID, name, and action. And of course, we can hard code ID, name, and action, but what's the point will be to have the data object in this place. And in this case, we don't want to hard code them here, but we want to iterate through the array header to actually populate the tr in the loop. So we'll stop at this point. And here we can say that our table contains one t-head and one tr. And just to confirm this fact, we want to save the script, and we will execute this again. And let us check the document structure. Table, t-head, and tr. Everything as expected. We see no drawing here on the HTML page simply because our table has no data. And we didn't specify any CSS to show borders to our table. Now we want to iterate through this array of headers and append entries from this array as the th tags to the existing tr. So we can do this, for example, by the following way. We can say the data header. In this case, we reference the header object in the data. And now we can say, for example, we can do a number of different things. One of them would be to use for each method, excuse me, for each method that is a standard JavaScript method of the array. You should know this. And we define a function to be executed for every entry in that array. Let me just call this item. So what we do here, we define a function that will receive a single parameter, and this function will be executed 3 times. One time it will be executed with ID, second time it will be executed with name, and third time it will be executed with action. Okay? On every execution of that function, we have to add certain item, the text, as the th flag, th tag to the previously existing tr. So for us to be able to append this to the tr, we first have to locate the corresponding tr entry. And in this case, we will use something called selector in jQuery language. So that will be table object, and then we want to find the head, and immediately after the head, we want to find tr. So this line demonstrates 2 techniques. One of them to use previously created variable that references table object that has already been mounted to the document body. And in that table, we find a t-head that is immediately followed by tr. We already created them here. Right? That's the code that creates tr element to the t-head. Because without this fragment of the code, we couldn't proceed with this loop, as tr and t-head wouldn't exist. So now, once we located particular tr element, we want to append a new th element. And for that th element, we want to use the text item. Now, as you can see, we can specify value from the array that is available on current iteration of that loop. and we pass it as the parameter of the text method. Method text will be called to the newly created th element. And once it is set up, we immediately append this th element to the previously located tr. So let us see how it works now. Okay, here is our table with th, with single tr, and with 3 th elements. Let us now look at this code again. There is one performance issue that you probably observe. We execute this statement multiple times on every iteration of that loop. Okay, and there is no need for this because it is exact same tr that we previously created. Let us try to resort the logic slightly, and instead of making this lookup over and over again, we'll use a variable name in this place. This can be done by removing this part from here. And actually, we don't need this. And we can just say, we need a new variable called header row that will be a tr, the query object created around the tr tag. And now we want to append it to, what we should append it to is actually table that find the head. Okay. So we created t-head, right? And now in this statement, we can look up for that t-head like this. This will provide us a reference to the t-head object that we can use as the target to append newly created tr elements to. So now instead of doing lookups over and over again in the loop, and let's say header row append th. This kind of syntax is more optimal from the performance standpoint because we will do lookup to the table element just once, and then in the loop, instead of calling to the method find multiple times, we'll just use the reference stored in the variable header row. And just to show that the result will be the same, let us execute this code again. As you can see, it is exact same result. We have number of th added to tr and then t-head. So in this case, we can say that this part is complete. Now let us switch to the body portion of the table. And to deal with the body, we can apply exact same trick, and we can just say that we want to create a new variable called body. We don't use literally the same trick because body, in contrast with header, will have multiple rows. And we should not actually memorize the header row or the body row as the only one. We have to store reference to the body element. So body will be a new tBody element that will be appended to what we think we will append tBody to the table. The table already contains t-head element as immediate child. When we append newly created tBody to the table, we just place it immediately after t-head in the document object model. And the result will be stored in the body variable. So let us see that tBody is now available as part of the HTML markup created here. Yes, here it is. T-head has not been modified because we didn't do anything with the t-head. And now tBody is added. All right. Now we want to work with adding up those rows data. And let me just add some comments here. By the way, we can combine these two elements together, and I'm not going to do now. This would be a good practice for you in terms of what can you do to actually combine these two statements together into just a single statement. So now we want to organize a loop through rows, and for every entry of that, on every iteration of that loop, we'll consider different entries in that array to append as different TD elements on the newly created TR. So let us do this. So I want to organize another for each loop, data rows, and for each, and then function item, and inside that function, I will have, on every iteration of that loop, I will have reference to that array. So item will be on first iteration of the loop this array, on second iteration of that loop will be the second array, and so on and so forth. Now, I do have the body element, and I want to create a temporal row element that will be a new tr to be appended to tBody, which is okay. Now, as I created a row element, I have the reference, and now I want to create 3 TD elements to the given role. So now I can apply this kind of tricks, but instead of TH, I could have used TD elements. So now I can say item. Item is an array. Okay? And for each, there will be another function. And here I will have TD instead of item because item has already been used. And now I will use raw append new TD with text of TD entry. One more time. We created a loop that iterates through this array of rows. On every iteration of the outer loop, we have variable item defined as one of those rows. So we created a new jQuery row, and we appended this to the body of the table that has already been created previously. And then since item is an array itself, we can iterate through this array. And on every iteration of that loop, we create a new TD. And just to make the syntax more speaking to itself, let me just do the indentation. So we append a new TD with defined text as TD, and we append it to the row that has already been created. All right, let us try to run this kind of loop. All right, that's pretty much all I wanted to show you as getting started, and we exceeded the time frame of the lecture. I will formulate an assignment for you to do, so you can continue working on this. And should you have any questions, please feel free to post your questions on the discussion board. And I do encourage you to study different techniques of appending and manipulating and finding and storing references that we used in this example to populate the HTML markup that has a simple table in it. Of course, you can do exactly this, you can achieve exact same result without jQuery, but probably it will take longer than 30 lines of the code in this case. Right, anyway, thank you for watching, and again, I apologize for not doing this in class. I really wouldn't like to spread my code virus on you, so that's why I decided to stay home today. Right, that's it. If anybody have any questions? No.